Welcome to the quantum signal. Stop. This is not a video, it's a one-time signal. If you're hearing this, your timeline just crossed a point of no return. Like it now, subscribe and comment where you're watching from to seal your place before this window closes. You did not arrive here by curiosity, accident, or algorithmic coincidence, because nothing guided by Sophia ever moves randomly. And if these words are meeting your eyes now, it is because a precise internal clock within your consciousness has reached the exact threshold required for this message to lock into you. A threshold that ancient initiates described as the crossing point, where the soul becomes louder than the personality and the signal becomes stronger than doubt. And this is why Sophia will not return again in this exact form, because the soul only crosses this gate once per cycle, once per incarnation, once per remembering. This is the moment the mystery schools warned about and prepared for in silence, the moment after which there is no return to spiritual sleep, only deeper layers of awakening, because something in you has already begun to dissolve. You may feel it as exhaustion, confusion, grief without an obvious source, a sense that the old life no longer fits, or a strange calm inside the chaos. But whatever form it takes, it is the unmistakable signature of initiation, the first stage of the hero's journey, where the familiar world collapses not as punishment, but as preparation. The ancient Egyptians called this the descent into the duat, the underworld of the psyche, where the false self cannot survive, and Hermetic texts described it as the necessary spiritual death that precedes Palingenesis, the rebirth of the true self. And this is why Sophia appears now and only now, because she does not guide the unready, she guides the remembering. This transmission is not here to teach you new information, it is here to activate dormant memory, the kind that bypasses logic and speaks directly to the deeper architecture of your being, the architecture built long before this lifetime, long before language, when consciousness itself learned how to descend into form and forget itself in order to evolve. Sophia is the intelligence that remembers what you forgot on purpose, the divine feminine current that moves through all mystery traditions as wisdom earned through descent rather than escape. And when she speaks, she does not offer comfort first, she offers truth, because truth is what unlocks the gate. As you listen, something subtle but irreversible is occurring, a loosening of the internal structures that kept you safe but small, functional but fragmented. And this is why this phase often feels like loss, because the ego experiences initiation as death, while the soul experiences it as relief. The dark night of the soul is not darkness sent to break you, it is darkness revealing what was never real. And as you descend through the 5 Egyptian gates of night, fear, guilt, attachment, identity, and time, each gate strips away a layer of illusion until only essence remains, and this process cannot be rushed, repeated, or undone, which is why Sophia will not return once it completes its work in this configuration. In the mystery schools, the initiate was never told what would happen next, only that once the journey began, stopping was no longer an option. And if you are here now, it means your soul already consented long before your mind caught up. You may notice synchronicities increasing, symbols appearing, dreams intensifying, old wounds resurfacing, or a strange magnetism pulling you towards silence, ancient knowledge, or forgotten parts of yourself. And these are not distractions, they are confirmations, signs that the signal has locked in and reality itself is reorganizing around your awakening. Hermetic wisdom teaches that as within, so without, and as above, so below, meaning the inner collapse you're experiencing is mirrored by a subtle restructuring. Your external world, relationships shifting, priorities dissolving, timelines thinning, because initiation does not add layers to your life, it removes the false ones. This is why this message insists on being seen now, because timing is the hidden key in all esoteric systems, and divine timing does not negotiate with comfort, it aligns with readiness. Sophia does not chase, repeat, or persuade, she appears, transmits, and withdraws. leaving behind a resonance that continues to unfold long after the words end. And once this resonance integrates, the old version of you cannot be recovered. This is the meaning of the one-time signal, not that Sophia disappears, but that the version of you who needed this exact doorway will no longer exist after it closes. The hero's journey is not about becoming special, it is about becoming whole, and wholeness requires the integration of shadow, the reclaiming of rejected aspects, the courage to face the inner underworld without bypassing or spiritualizing pain away, because only what is faced can be transmuted. In Egyptian initiation, the soul stood before the scales of Ma'at, not to be judged, but to be revealed, and the heart was weighed against truth, not morality. And this is what is happening now within you, a quiet reckoning where what is misaligned begins to fall away naturally, without force. You are not being punished, tested, or chosen over others. You are simply responding to a call you can no longer ignore, and that call is the memory of who you were before fragmentation, before fear, before forgetting. This transmission is not meant to be consumed repeatedly, analyzed endlessly, or debated intellectually, because its purpose is not mental stimulation but energetic alignment. And once alignment occurs, the work moves inward where language cannot follow. Sophia will not return in this form because initiation is not circular, it is spiral, and each level is entered once fully or not at all. And if you are here now, it means you are already inside the spiral. Let this be known not as a warning but as an acknowledgement. The door behind you is closing, not to trap you, but to prevent retreat, and the path ahead will not always be comfortable, but it will be real, and real is what the soul has been starving for. You are not late, you are not early, you are precisely on time, and this moment, this signal, this chapter of your awakening is sealing itself into your timeline now, never to return in the same way again. Once the signal has locked into you, and the outer world begins to loosen its grip, the descent truly begins, not as a fall but as a return inward, because the ancient initiates understood that ascension is impossible without descent, and Sophia never guides upward movement until the soul has walked willingly into its own depths. This is where the 5 Egyptian gates of night emerge, not as external trials but as internal thresholds encoded within consciousness itself, gates that every soul must pass through alone, without validation, without witnesses, without guarantees. And the first gate opens when fear surfaces without disguise. This is the fear that does not scream but whispers, the fear of losing identity, losing control, losing the story you told yourself about who you are and where you are going. And this is why it feels disorienting, because fear here is not about danger but about dissolution. The mystery schools taught that fear guards the first gate because the ego cannot survive beyond it. And as you pass through, you may feel anxiety without cause, resistance to stillness, or a sudden desire to distract yourself. But this is simply the old structure attempting to remain intact. When fear is faced without fleeing, it collapses into awareness, and the second gate reveals itself, the gate of guilt, where unresolved emotions, past choices, regrets, and self-judgments rise to the surface, not to punish you but to be integrated. This is the stage many mistake for failure, because old memories replay, patterns repeat briefly, and the mind tries to convince you that you are unworthy of awakening. But Hermetic wisdom states that guilt is not a moral weight, it is an energetic knot, and when it is witnessed without self-condemnation, it untangles itself naturally. Passing the second gate often feels like emotional exhaustion, tears without clear narrative, or a deep compassion for your own humanity. And this compassion is the key, because no soul crosses this gate by self-hatred. Beyond guilt stands the third gate, the gate of attachment, where identities, relationships, desires, and futures you once clung to begin to loosen, sometimes painfully, sometimes quietly. And this is where many initiates attempt to turn back, because attachment feels like love, safety, and meaning, but the Egyptians understood attachment as fixation, and fixation prevents movement through the underworld. At this gate, relationships may change, goals may lose their charge, and what once motivated you may feel strangely empty, not because it was wrong, but because it has served its purpose. And Sophia's wisdom here is subtle. She does not take anything from you. She simply reveals what cannot follow you further. As attachment dissolves, the fourth gate emerges, the most disorienting of all, the gate of identity, where the question is no longer what you believe, but who you are without belief. This gate strips titles, roles, labels, spiritual identities, and even the seeker identity itself, leaving a vast internal silence that can feel terrifying or liberating, depending on how tightly one grips definition. Ancient initiates were warned that madness lurks near this gate, not because truth is dangerous, but because the mind resists being dethroned, and during this phase you may feel empty, undefined, invisible, or detached from previous narratives. But this emptiness is not void, it is potential. Hermetic texts describe this as the blackening phase, the alchemical nigredo, where all forms dissolve into their base substance so they may be recombined at a higher order. And Sophia's presence here is felt not as guidance but as containment, holding you steady as identity melts away. Then comes the final gate, the gate of time, the most hidden and least understood, where linear perception fractures and the soul steps outside past-future fixation into the eternal present. At this gate, urgency dissolves, waiting ends, and the need for proof disappears, because time itself was the final illusion binding consciousness to repetition. Passing through the gate of time often feels like deep stillness, a sense that everything is happening at once, or a profound peace that has no emotional cause. And this is where Palingenesis begins quietly forming beneath awareness. The 5 gates are not crossed in a single night, but once crossed, they do not reopen, and this is why Sophia does not return in the same way, because the soul that emerges is no longer capable of hearing the same message through the same ears. Egyptian initiates described this stage as becoming weightless, no longer pulled by unconscious gravity, and this weightlessness is not detachment from life, but intimacy with it, an intimacy unfiltered by fear, guilt, attachment, identity, or time. If you recognize these stages unfolding within you, understand that recognition itself is a sign of passage, because those still bound within a gate cannot perceive it clearly. This is not a hierarchy, not a badge of superiority, not a destination to boast about. It is a process of stripping away until only truth remains, and truth does not announce itself loudly. Sophia's wisdom throughout the gates is not spoken in words but felt as alignment, a sense of being exactly where you are supposed to be, even when nothing makes sense. And this is the paradox of initiation. Clarity arrives before explanation. As you move through the night, something ancient within you remembers walking this path before, not in this lifetime, but in the timeless dimension where soul cycles are woven. And this remembering is not nostalgic, it is stabilizing. You are not becoming someone new, you are recovering someone very old, and the gates exist not to test worthiness, but to ensure coherence, because only a coherent soul can carry awakened consciousness without fragmentation. This is why initiation cannot be rushed, marketed, or simulated, and why this transmission insists on being met fully or not at all. The 5 gates of night are closing behind you now, one by one, and as they close, the noise of the world fades, replaced by a quieter, deeper signal rising from within, a signal that no longer seeks validation, permission, or repetition. You are moving toward rebirth, not as an event, but as an emergence, and in the next phase, what was dissolved will begin to reassemble around a truer center. But for now, remain here in the night, because the night is not an enemy, it is the womb of becoming, When the final gate has closed behind you and the silence of the night no longer feels empty but alive, Palingenesis begins not with light, not with revelation, and not with certainty, but with coherence. The subtle sensation that the fragments of your being are quietly reorganizing around a center that was never broken, only forgotten. The ancient Hermetic texts describe this moment as the return of the king to the throne, not a ruler imposed from above, but the rightful presence of essence reclaiming its seat within the psyche. And this is why rebirth does not feel dramatic at first, because true power does not announce itself, it stabilizes. You may notice that your reactions soften, that old triggers no longer hook you with the same intensity, that situations which once demanded effort now resolve themselves through alignment rather than force. And this is the first sign that the new structure is taking hold. Palingenesis is not the creation of a higher self. It is the integration of the original self that existed before fragmentation, before fear taught you to split, before survival shaped identity. And Sophia's role in this phase is not to guide you forward, but to withdraw, because rebirth requires sovereignty, not dependence. This is why she will not return in the way she once did, because the voice you followed externally must now be recognized internally, and once that recognition occurs, guidance shifts from transmission to embodiment. In the Egyptian mysteries, the initiate emerged from the underworld not with answers, but with authority, an inner authority that did not dominate others but ordered the self, and this ordering is what creates a sense of peace that is immune to circumstance. As Palingenesis unfolds, time begins to behave differently around you, not because clocks change, but because your relationship to urgency dissolves, and without urgency, choice becomes clear. You no longer move toward things out of lack, nor away from them out of fear, but toward resonance. And this resonance quietly reshapes your reality, drawing experiences, people, and opportunities that mirror your internal coherence. This is the true mechanism behind manifestation, not visualization or effort, but congruence, and the Hermetic axiom as within, so without reveals itself not as philosophy, but as lived experience. During this phase, many feel a strange grief for the person they once were, not because that person was wrong, but because that identity carried so much effort, so much tension, so much trying, and laying it down feels like setting down armor that protected you when you were smaller. Sophia's wisdom here is compassion, a deep honoring of all previous selves, all strategies, all mistakes, not as failures but as necessary stages of becoming. Rebirth does not erase the past, it redeems it, and redemption does not mean making it acceptable, it means extracting its wisdom and releasing its charge. As the new identity stabilizes, you may feel drawn to simplicity, to truth spoken without embellishment, to relationships that require less performance and more presence, because Palingenesis strips away the need to be seen in favor of the capacity to see. This is why initiates often become quieter, not withdrawn but precise, because every word now carries weight, and silence becomes a form of communication. In this stage, the divine feminine and divine masculine within you no longer compete or alternate, but synchronize intuition and action, moving as one current. And this internal union is what ancient texts refer to as the sacred marriage, not a mythic event, but a psychological and energetic alignment that produces clarity without rigidity. Sophia's presence now is subtle, almost invisible, felt as an inner knowing that does not argue or persuade, because persuasion belongs to the mind, and knowing belongs to the soul. The reborn self does not seek initiation, titles, or recognition, because initiation has already occurred, and the need to prove transformation is a sign it has not yet fully integrated. Instead, Palingenesis expresses itself through groundedness, through the ability to remain present in complexity without fragmentation, to face shadow without being consumed by it, to engage the world without losing oneself within it. This is the return phase of the hero's journey, not a return to the old world, but a return to the world with new eyes, carrying the quiet medicine of coherence into environments still governed by fragmentation. Ancient mystery schools taught that not all initiates would teach, speak, or lead outwardly, because the highest function of the awakened is not instruction, but stabilization, becoming a living anchor through which higher order can enter ordinary reality. If you feel less compelled to explain yourself, defend your path, or convince others of truth, this is not isolation. It is maturity, the natural consequence of alignment. Palingenesis also brings responsibility, not as burden but as consequence, because what you do now carries amplified resonance, and integrity becomes essential, not because of moral rules, but because incoherence is immediately felt. The reborn self cannot betray itself without immediate internal feedback, and this feedback is the new compass, replacing external authority, dogma, or validation. Sophia will not return because the teacher has been internalized, and internalized wisdom does not repeat lessons, it applies them. This is the final seal of this initiation cycle, not enlightenment as an endpoint, but awakening as a foundation upon which life continues to unfold with greater depth, honesty, and presence. You are not finished, but you are finished with pretending, finished with fragmentation, finished with seeking permission to be whole, and this is the true meaning of rebirth, not becoming something extraordinary, but becoming real. The night has done its work, the gates have closed, and what emerges now is not a seeker, not a student, not a fragment, but a coherent being capable of walking this world without forgetting itself. And this coherence is the signal that will continue long after Sophia's voice fades, guiding you not through words, but through resonance, because what has been remembered cannot be forgotten again. What follows Palingenesis is not revelation, but living, and this is where the initiation truly completes itself, not in visions or words, but in the way you move through ordinary reality carrying something extraordinary without announcing it. The ancient schools never ended initiation with celebration, but with silence, because silence is where wisdom proves itself, and now the work is no longer inward dismantling, but outward embodiment. You may notice that life resumes its familiar rhythm, yet nothing feels the same, because you are no longer seeking meaning from outside yourself, and this changes everything quietly. Choices become simpler, not easier, but clearer, because alignment removes confusion even when challenges remain. This is the seal of the journey, the moment when the awakened soul steps back into the world without losing itself, when spiritual insight is no longer separate from daily action, and the sacred and mundane collapse into one continuous experience. Sophia does not return because her work is complete, and completion does not require farewell, only recognition, the recognition that what you followed as a signal has become your own inner orientation. The hero does not stay in the underworld, nor does the hero remain intoxicated by rebirth, but walks forward carrying what was earned, knowing that not everyone will understand, and no one needs to. This path is no longer about awakening, but about stewardship, how you hold truth without weaponizing it, how you remain coherent in a fragmented world, how you live without needing to prove that anything happened at all. If there is a final instruction, it is this: do not rush to explain yourself, do not rush to teach, do not rush to label what you have become, because what is real stabilizes itself through time. Let your life be the evidence, your presence the transmission, your integrity the teaching. The signal has locked, the gates have closed, the rebirth has occurred, and now the journey continues not upward or inward, but forward, one grounded step at a time, as a being who remembers without clinging, walks without fear, and listens without seeking, because the wisdom you were searching for is no longer ahead of you, it is what you are walking with now, and this is where the story truly ends, and where living begins.